A man who seemed to have everything, wealth, power, influence, was living with a wound no fortune could heal. At just 57, he had built an empire in technology, but a single accident shattered his world. In one moment, he lost the woman he loved, and his only daughter lost the light in her eyes forever. Still, every weekend, he tried to give her pieces of the world she could no longer see. On a quiet Saturday morning, he took her to the zoo, hoping she could feel the life and joy around her. But instead of comfort, they stumbled into a scene that would change their lives forever. What began as a day meant for healing would uncover secrets of power, prejudice, and injustice so deep that it would shake the foundations of an entire city. Will you see what they discovered? Daniel Wright had learned long ago that success could not protect a man from pain. At just 57, he was one of the youngest and most celebrated CEOs in the tech industry. His company shaped the future of communication. His name often appeared in financial magazines, and investors treated his decisions like gospel. But behind the gleaming headlines and corporate victories, his private life carried a wound that no achievement could erase. 2 years earlier, a sudden car accident had torn his world apart. His wife, the partner he had built a life with, was gone in an instant. His daughter, Grace, survived, but the crash left her blind. The doctors spoke of nerves and damage, of slim chances and rare procedures. Daniel remembered none of those details. He remembered only the silence of the hospital waiting room, the sound of machines, and the way Grace's small hand searched for his, asking if the darkness would ever end. From that moment, everything changed. Daniel devoted himself to Grace's world. Boardrooms, conferences, and late-night meetings filled his weekdays, but weekends were sacred. On Saturdays, he shut down his calendar and silenced his phone. Those days belonged entirely to his daughter. He wanted her to feel that, though her world had been altered, she was not broken. He brought her to parks where she could feel the textures of trees, to aquariums where she pressed her palms against the glass and sensed the vibrations of passing fish, to libraries where audiobooks opened doors she could no longer see. Grace, though blind, carried a remarkable gift. She could sense people in ways Daniel could not. Their emotions, their intentions, their inner storms. She seemed to feel them instantly. At times, Daniel wondered if the darkness she lived in had sharpened another kind of sight. It was this sensitivity that made him careful about where he took her. He wanted to shield her from cruelty. But the world has a way of revealing its shadows when least expected. That Saturday morning in New York City, Daniel chose the zoo. He wanted Grace to hear the flamingos' calls, the rustle of their wings, the splash of their movements in shallow pools. He wanted her to sense life all around her. The city was waking slowly, sunlight bending over glass towers, and for a few hours, it felt like hope could return. Grace clutched his hand as they entered, her voice curious, eager. For Daniel, the zoo was more than an outing. It was a test. Could he still give his daughter a world of wonder despite her blindness? Could he create moments that would live in her memory even without sight? These questions haunted him. Every laugh from Grace gave him relief, but every pause reminded him of what had been taken. The right name carried weight in New York. People knew him as the widowed millionaire who had turned his grief into relentless work. Articles painted him as a visionary with tragedy in his past. But in the zoo, walking among families, he was simply a father. No business suits, no headlines, just a man with a daughter who trusted him completely. What Daniel didn't know was that their peaceful day would collide with a storm brewing quietly among strangers. In a corner of the zoo, at the edge of the flamingo exhibit, wealth and prejudice were about to meet dignity and resilience. Grace's gift, her uncanny ability to feel what others ignored, would sense it first. And through that moment, their lives would be pulled into a battle neither of them had expected. The incident seemed small at first glance, something most visitors might have walked past without a second thought. But it carried the seeds of revelation. That day at the zoo, Daniel would encounter someone who appeared ordinary, even overlooked, yet whose presence would uncover truths powerful enough to topple an empire. Every life-changing story has a beginning, often hidden in the ordinary. For Daniel and Grace, it began with flamingos, the sound of laughter in the air, and the illusion of safety on a Saturday morning. They believed they were there to escape grief. Instead, they were walking straight into the heart of it. The zoo was alive with chatter and laughter, families pointing at exhibits, children tugging at parents' sleeves. Daniel felt Grace's small hand gripping his as they strolled past the flamingo pond. She tilted her face toward the sounds of splashing water and the shrill cries of the birds. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe this was a simple, ordinary day. Then came a voice, sharp, cutting through the air like broken glass. It was the kind of voice that demanded attention, not with warmth but with cruelty. "I don't spend thousands of dollars for my granddaughter to mix with people like you," the woman snapped. Daniel froze. Grace tilted her head. "Daddy," she whispered, "someone's angry. I can feel it." At the railing stood a wealthy, middle-aged woman draped in diamonds, her posture radiating superiority. Beside her, a young black nanny held the hand of a small blonde girl. The nanny's presence was calm, her grip protective, but the grandmother's glare burned with disdain. "You people have your own places, don't you think?" the woman's voice carried, drawing stares from nearby families. The words struck like a slap, public, humiliating, deliberate. Daniel felt Grace squeeze his hand. Though she couldn't see, she understood more than anyone around her. "That lady is being mean," she murmured, her voice trembling. "The nice lady is sad." The nanny did not lash out. She didn't shrink either. With quiet dignity, she said, "Ma'am, I'm simply caring for Chloe as I always do. We are not bothering anyone." But dignity only seemed to fuel the woman's venom. She sneered, her jeweled hands gesturing wildly. "Your presence itself is a nuisance. People like you should know your place." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, unwilling to get involved. Others whispered under their breath. Daniel felt anger rising inside him. But before he could step forward, the moment exploded. The little girl, Chloe, slipped free from the nanny's hand and darted toward the water's edge. Gasps rippled as her tiny shoes skidded on the wet ground. In a flash, the nanny lunged, catching her just before she tumbled. Relief swept the crowd, until the nanny lost her own footing. She fell hard, mud splattering across her uniform, but she never let go of the child. The crowd exhaled in unison, but the grandmother's face twisted with disgust instead of gratitude. "Look at this disaster," she shouted. "You can't even manage a child without causing a scene. People like you should never be trusted with children." Daniel's jaw tightened. His instinct screamed to defend the woman, to confront the venom spilling into the air, but his focus turned to Grace. She clung to his hand, trembling. Though blind, she could feel every ounce of cruelty in the scene, every injustice. And then, something remarkable happened. The nanny, covered in mud, stood tall. Her faint smile wasn't broken. It was confident, almost knowing. "You're right," she said evenly. "People like me do have a particular place in society." Her words sounded submissive to those who didn't listen closely. But Daniel heard something different. An edge of strength, a quiet truth layered beneath the calm. It unsettled him. Who was this woman? Why did her presence feel larger than the insult hurled against her? The moment passed, but it lingered in Daniel's thoughts long after they left the zoo. He couldn't shake the image of the nanny's steady eyes, her resilience against humiliation, and neither could Grace. That evening, as they walked home, she asked softly, "Daddy, do you think the kind lady is okay?" Days later, Daniel found himself drawn into the orbit of the same woman again. Outside a grand Boston estate, he overheard the voice of the diamond-clad grandmother, now revealed as Eleanor Whitmore, matriarch of one of the most powerful families in the Northeast. Her tone was sharp as ever. "Stop filling Chloe's head with foolish dreams," Eleanor scolded. "Our family has traditions. She will attend the schools we choose. Don't you dare fill her with ideas above her place." The nanny stood there, serene, her uniform pressed despite the humiliation she had endured days earlier. And again that faint smile returned. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. Everyone should know their place." To Eleanor it sounded like obedience. To Daniel, who stood unnoticed nearby, it was a warning. There was something behind those words, a hidden certainty, a truth Eleanor couldn't see. The curiosity gnawed at him. Who was this woman really? Why did her calm sound like a storm waiting to break? Daniel began to dig. Late nights that should have been spent on quarterly reports turned into hours of quiet research. He learned of the Whitmore family empire, an educational dynasty running some of the most exclusive private schools in the country. Their reputation sparkled with prestige, but beneath the surface were whispers of elitism, exclusion, and systemic discrimination. And still, the nanny remained a mystery. No record, no trace of who she truly was. Until the day Daniel's world collided with hers again. Not by chance, but by design. In a sleek glass boardroom filled with investors, Daniel was interrupted mid-presentation. His assistant entered nervously. "Sir," she said, "a young woman is here. She insists she has a proposal about your inclusive education project." Daniel frowned. That project, born from Grace's blindness, was still confidential. Few people even knew it existed. Who could this be? The boardroom doors opened. The room stilled, and Daniel's heart nearly stopped. It was her. But this time she was no nanny. The room seemed to hold its breath. Gone was the nanny in the plain uniform. In her place stood a woman transformed. Navy blazer perfectly tailored, leather briefcase in hand, voice steady and commanding. "Mr. Wright," she said, meeting Daniel's stunned gaze. "My name is Dr. Maya Collins. I hold a PhD in special education from Yale, and I think we share a mission." The board members shifted uncomfortably, whispering. Daniel's pulse quickened. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a revelation. Maya laid documents across the glossy table, emails, contracts, handwritten notes. But it was the recordings that made the room fall silent. Eleanor Whitmore's voice filled the air, dripping with superiority. "Our schools are designed for families with proper values. We don't accommodate unusual cases." Daniel felt the sting as though the words were directed at Grace. The same disdain that had humiliated Maya in public was baked into an entire institution. For months, Maya explained, she had been undercover. Hired through an agency, Eleanor had never checked her credentials. She saw only what she wanted to see. A young black woman desperate for work. That blindness gave Maya access, and she used it to document decades of discrimination. Policies that kept children out because of race, disability, or family background. The weight of her courage struck Daniel like thunder. Every humiliation she endured in public, every insult she had answered with silence, had been part of a larger plan. She had swallowed their scorn so she could expose their system. But courage alone wasn't enough. Eleanor Whitmore's reach was vast. She had lawyers, politicians, and even board members in her pocket. Challenging her empire meant risking everything. And Maya had risked it all. Her career, her reputation, her safety. Daniel joined forces with her, bringing in his old friend Dr. Samuel Green, a civil rights lawyer, and Detective Alvarez from the New York Civil Rights Department. Together, they built a case brick by brick. Maya had done the dangerous work of gathering evidence. Now it was time to strike. The trap was set in a single phone call. Daniel, posing as a parent, inquired about enrolling Grace in a Whitmore school. Eleanor herself answered, her voice cool and practiced. She spoke of tradition, of standards. But when Daniel pressed, her mask slipped. "We do not have the structure for children like yours. The call was recorded. The stage was ready. At a Whitmore board meeting weeks later, Eleanor strode in with the confidence of a queen. Surrounded by allies, she spoke proudly of the legacy she was protecting. But mid-sentence, the doors burst open. Federal agents entered, Detective Alvarez at their lead. Files and recordings landed on the polished table, each page a weapon, each voice clip a dagger. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Eleanor demanded silence, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But then the doors opened once more. Maya walked in, not in uniform, not in disguise, but as the scholar she truly was. She stood before Eleanor, her voice unshakable. "Allow me to reintroduce myself. Dr. Maya Collins, Yale Ph.D., specialist in institutional discrimination, and for 6 months your undercover employee." Gasps rippled through the room. Board members leaned back, distancing themselves from Eleanor as though her disgrace might stain them. The empire she had ruled for decades trembled under the weight of truth. Eleanor tried to fight. She raised her voice, called it entrapment, and accused Maya of betrayal. But betrayal belonged to her, the betrayal of every child denied opportunity, every family silenced by prejudice. The agents read out the charges: systemic discrimination, fraud, and misuse of funds. Years of arrogance collapsed in a single afternoon. And yet, in the midst of Eleanor's downfall, Daniel's focus was not on her rage but on grace. He thought of his daughter, blind yet full of light, and the thousands of children like her, pushed aside by people who believed they did not belong. This was the turning point. Not just for Maya, not just for him, but for every child who had ever been told they had no place. The moment was electric, a collision of past injustice and future hope. The very walls of the Whitmore empire seemed to crumble. Eleanor's voice, once so powerful, was drowned by the sound of evidence played back again and again. Every insult, every cruel remark she thought hidden in private, now broadcast for all to hear. By the end of the meeting, Eleanor's allies had deserted her. Her fortune was slipping through her fingers, her name irreparably stained. But the most devastating blow was still to come, because Maya wasn't finished. She looked Eleanor directly in the eyes, not with anger, but with unshakable conviction. "You thought people like me belonged beneath you, but today I stand here as proof that your power was built on lies. And lies cannot stand forever." The silence that followed was crushing. The empire had fallen, but the fight was far from over. The Whitmore dynasty crumbled faster than anyone imagined. Within months, headlines carried the verdict across the nation. Elite school director sentenced to 6 years for systematic discrimination. Eleanor Whitmore, once untouchable, had lost everything. Her position, her wealth, and most of all, the illusion of superiority she had built her life upon. For Daniel, the outcome was more than justice against one woman. It was the start of something larger. He and Maya, now openly working side by side, poured their energy into a vision Eleanor had spent decades fighting against. They founded inclusive schools where barriers of race, disability, and background dissolved. Children who had been denied entry to elite classrooms were now welcomed, celebrated, and given the resources to thrive. Grace became the beating heart of that mission. Her blindness, once seen as a limitation, became a symbol of resilience. She stood at ribbon cuttings, her smile radiant as she told children that no darkness could define them. Reporters wrote about her wisdom, about the young girl who could sense kindness and cruelty without ever opening her eyes. She was living proof that those deemed unfit by prejudice were often the very souls capable of reshaping the world. Maya's role grew beyond the classroom. Her lectures filled auditoriums, her book on institutional discrimination sparked national debate, and her voice carried into policy circles where change had been delayed for too long. She had been dismissed as just a nanny, yet she became one of the strongest voices in education reform. What Eleanor tried to silence had instead ignited a movement. But the deepest impact was personal. Daniel, once shattered by grief, found new purpose in the fight for equality. Grace, once shielded from the harshness of the world, grew strong enough to confront it. And Maya, once underestimated, proved that courage could outlast cruelty. Still, the story wasn't simply about victory. It was about the truth of racism, the quiet comments spoken in boardrooms, the policies dressed as tradition, the prejudice hidden behind wealth and power. Eleanor Whitmore wasn't an isolated villain. She was a mirror reflecting a system that too often told people where they did or did not belong. The downfall of one woman didn't erase that system overnight, but it showed what was possible when dignity met courage, when silence was broken by truth. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Grace asked her father, "Do you still think about the mean lady at the zoo?" Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "Sometimes, but not with anger, with gratitude." She reminded us that the world needed to change. And Grace, wise beyond her years, answered, "Dr. Collins says the best revenge is building something better than what they tried to destroy." Her words became the motto of their movement. Not revenge, but rebuilding. Not hatred, but hope. The empire of exclusion had fallen, but in its place, a new foundation was rising, one brick at a time, built on justice, equality, and compassion. As you listen to the story, ask yourself, how many more Eleanors still hold positions of power? How many children are quietly told they do not belong? And what will it take for us, together, to dismantle those walls? Because racism is not just a relic of the past. It is alive in policies, in institutions, in the everyday choices of those who look away. But so too is the power to resist it, through courage, through truth, through the refusal to accept silence. The question is not whether injustice exists. The question is, what will you do when you see it? You've just heard the story of Daniel, Grace, and Dr. Maya Collins, how a day at the zoo uncovered prejudice, exposed an empire of discrimination, and sparked a justice movement. What part of their journey struck you the most? Was it Grace's quiet strength, Maya's hidden courage, or the fall of a woman who thought power could protect her prejudice? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.